Hi everyone. I'm currently in Poland in a very interesting location. It's called the Palace of Culture and Science. I really like that combination. So currently, right now, we're in Poland, and as you probably know, there's a few million refugees that are coming from Ukraine directly to Poland. It makes sense. It's one of the closest area. There's a total of about 5 million refugees right now. Add a few more million that are internally displaced. And currently, we're in a very interesting location. It's a kind of communist era type of building, and the government set up a little nice area to work on that crisis. Because currently, the way it happens when you have that conflict is all kind of organization mobilize. You have bigger NGOs, you have small organizations as well. They need a place so they can coordinate their efforts. The show today is specifically about those efforts. Basically, what happens when you're an organization and you need to mobilize, you need to coordinate, you need to have more impact. At Grey Box, we like talking about technology. This show is all about the different type of trends that help us having more impact. And currently, let's do a show about tech trends and more specifically what an organization can expect to have in the short term. So let me get in my room. I will introduce Dennis so he can do his intro and present us the guests.
Thanks, Valentin. The institution here with Grey Box as well. It's a pleasure to see what you're working on there, Valentin, the location you're coming from, because you're there on the ground doing some interesting work to help out the refugees who are interested in coming to Canada, seeing what it's like there in person. And while you're setting up, I'll hide you there for a second, but basically today we wanted to bring two really interesting guests. Jan Giroux, CEO of Upland, and Timothy Pereira, co-founder of AI LunchLabs. We've spoken with you guys before on various different topics. We know you guys are technology leaders across Canada to bring interesting conversations around AI, around education, and it would be great to hear from you as leaders about what's on your radar, what is your organization facing in the coming short little while, and what kind of technology is impacting how you're doing work and what the future of your work looks like. So welcome to the stream, Jan, Timothy. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Dennis. Doing fine.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having us on. That was an amazing intro. I love that.
Indeed.
So you're both coming to us from Montreal, is that correct?
Yeah.
Exceptionally today, yes.
And I'm back. Not such a previous location, not such an interesting location this time. It's just a wall, but it's filled with those small little rooms. And by the way, the room I showed you is one of the rooms of that floor. This was one floor. There's a 200 meters worth of that building, and that was just one floor. It's pretty impressive. Anyway, let's talk about some tech trends. The idea that topic was so popular that we had to cut the show in two pieces. By the way, next episode we'll talk about long-term trends. This show is specifically about short-term trends, and we have Timothy and Jan who were more specifically interested in that part. And the reason why we divide that is, and to clarify, short-term is 1 to 3 years, and long-term is 3 years and more. Why? Because that's what we kind of agree with. Every different analysis, every different report cuts it differently. What we've seen is that it just makes no sense for a nonprofit to talk about long-term on like a 10 to 20-year horizon. That is too far off unless they're extremely big as an organization. They're just not thinking of that scale. But if you're an organization and you're worrying about the next few budgets that you're going to work on, basically where you should allocate your money, your resources to make sure you don't miss a train, short term is what we're talking about. So I'll start with you, Jan, for example. What is kind of the trends that you see that is not upcoming, it's pretty well established, and now is a good time to jump on it?
I think a big trend is what's coming is like everything has come to personalized digital health. I see it a lot. I'm on a board of research center in the biomedical devices as well that are coming to the market now. And we see more and more than a lot of pathology are pretty singular in the way a human lives it, whether it's neurologic troubles or other disease that you can see. By the way, like Valentin, our background is edtech, so we care a lot about those things. I think that this is the technology that keeps emerging, that goes pretty fast in the way that the system itself is not braced to go fast. I think there's a lot of transformation and trends. It's a big trend. I think health tech in general, and we have Timothy that can, I believe, agree on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, in terms of the next 1 to 3 years, are we talking in terms of how it'll affect nonprofits or just general more broadly?
I would say specifically social innovation. There are some trends that are very. I've seen some trends that at first were like, yeah, that doesn't relate to nonprofits. It's a bit too much on the marketing side and things like that, for example. But it turns out that nonprofits, social innovation, they have to advertise themselves. They have to use some tools that are similar to businesses, for example. And if it helps them, might as well. Jan talked, for example, about health tech. I've seen a few nonprofits that specifically dedicate the work to make sure that their community is healthy and all. And the issue that they have is, how do I make sure that my community is healthy? And also, how can I use those technologies, for example, smart bands and etc., without also compromise privacy and other parts, right? So this is a good example because, like anything, technology has multiple ramifications that you need to account for. So what comes in mind to you, Timothy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's kind of two reasons why everything maybe feels like it's happening so suddenly. You touched upon some of the political issues that are going on in the world today, and I think whether it's war, whether it's the politics of we saw the leak of Roe v. Wade that's potentially going to be overturned. All of these kind of things that are driving communities and nonprofits to mobilize, sometimes under really short notice, and they have to implement something big quickly. I think this is aided by the technological catalysts that are happening that we had partly because of the pandemic. So remote work, of course, virtual worlds, the metaverse, those types of things, crypto. I think all of these things are going to come together. Maybe 1 to 3 years it's starting. Some organizations will get there more quickly, but I think really now is the time for organizations to start to develop a plan, to be ready, and the sooner you're ready with all of these kind of I guess spaces, then you'll be better positioned for the next 3 to 5 years after that.
So let's go practical about it in that case. I think everybody's for virtue. We want to be ready, but of course, people within that space, and we're lucky. We are involved in social innovation organizations. Too many of our friends are probably also involved in that. And the question in the top of most people's mind is, okay, there's many options, but which one, or can you give me examples of what I should worry maybe first? And for example, Dennis, what is kind of one of those short-term tech trends that you're like, oh, now is a very good time to jump on it because it's not maybe in the future, it's definitely there and it will have impact?
I think an interesting one is definitely machine learning, AI. We're seeing a lot of that starting to really pop up in a lot of different industries, everything from content creation to implementation in terms of data analysis at different organizations, even things like translation, transcription. It's something that we're seeing across the board impacting industries that we thought might be in many more years in the future, and it's allowing organizations to make a greater impact using the tools that are available. Of course, it's an adaptation of how we treat things and what kind of work processes and flows that we have, and how many team members are potentially needed, how many resources are needed to accomplish certain things. I know on my end personally, creating content, there's a big impact in terms of how much content we can create and how much impact we can do with that content, because the accessibility is so much easier now. For example, transcription used to be such a intensive process. Now it's automated like crazy by AI, and we can pump out content that is able to be catering to a whole new audience that wouldn't have been accessible before to nonprofits with limited budget and limited resources. And I'd be very curious to hear from both you, Yan, and Timothy,
And
especially Timothy on your end, because you're dealing with AI on a regular daily basis. What kind of impacts, opportunities, and challenges are you facing today with potentially AI? And if not AI, then what else is really front and center for you in terms of what kind of technology is impacting your day-to-day now and over the coming, those short-term 1 to 3 years? What do you see?
And give me examples. I want simple examples. Oh, one thing, by the way, Dennis, you mentioned transcription tools. Since we're on the topic, I just want to shoot a few examples, because I know people in the nonprofit space and social innovation, they're like, cool, AI, I've been hearing about it, but I don't do AI. You don't do AI. What do we talk about? Let's give a few examples. Dennis, what are the few tools that right now you can probably recommend or listeners to take a look at?
It's really interesting because those tools, even just a few short months ago, they were limited in number of tools. So we were using Descript a lot. That's a fantastic tool. There's free
What's
versions.
this?
It's very, very accessible to help you transcribe a video automatically and then edit based on the transcript, rather than trying to chop video and then time it all perfectly. You delete some words and suddenly, bam, the video itself is edited to that specific piece. But I recently started seeing this implemented in stuff like Adobe Premiere Pro. Now transcription's available there. Different languages. There's platforms that I came across recently online that even do French transcription as well. It's
Nice.
multiplying at a very rapid pace. The accessibility to these tools is getting very, very good.
So it makes sense in terms of creating content, but it also makes sense in terms of accessibility. Not everybody is familiar with the language, so suddenly you can translate in different language. Not everybody knows how to edit. The fact you have a transcript and you can delete a sentence and that's it, that's your edit. Hey, I come from the world of video editing. I spent 3,000 hours editing. The first time I saw transcript, I was both extremely mad and extremely happy, because I used to do it by hand. I used a little tool I want to share with you. You'll thank me later. It's called Firefly. Rings a bell?
yeah, this does ring.
Yeah. And Jan, can you explain what Firefly is? I'm curious.
Well, it records your meeting and does your procès verbal. Sorry, I blank on that.
Yeah, exactly.
By
You
itself.
invite Firefly to a meeting, like you will invite just any email, and it sends you a recap with who said what. And they're even pushing in terms of every time somebody talks about actionable items, it will highlight it. Hey, this was the job of someone, and not the most fun job. I don't know if you ever have been on like that kind of duty. It's not the most fun part of when you're in a board and just transcribe the logs and etc. This is a simple example of AI for creating content, for promoting accessibility, and for also kind of accountability at the same time, that you can use AI. Firefly is free. Transcript costs like less than $20 a month, but it will save you, I think, Dennis, you can confirm, hours of editing. And even on Google Meet or when you have a Teams meeting, you can now activate those transcriptions that are getting really good. So that means as an organization, you can suddenly start maybe having multiple versions of your content in different languages, for example, or even if you only do one language, at least have it more accessible because it's readable.
Even
So
in
that's for AI.
internal context, it actually makes such a big impact. Like, I haven't heard about Firefly, but the one I've been using is TLDV, and it records the entire meeting, transcribes the thing. You can take notes directly in it as you go too, if you want to like link a specific section of it. That's a huge impact. Like, I'm using that as a strategy for almost every single meeting now, because one, I don't want to take notes of every single thing that everyone says, and two, the fact that you have the recording, you can come back to it anytime, review it, go to the key sections that are most valuable to you about the outcomes or what was said, maybe some of the specific terminology or language that was used by the expert that was there for the meeting specifically, and then implement that. That, like you said, Valentine, the accountability is huge. That's a very valuable piece, but it's also just making meetings much more valuable, because I know nowadays, especially because meetings can be virtual, you go back to back to back sometimes with meetings. You get tired. You don't necessarily absorb all the information. And before, all that would just go poof out the window unless you took really good notes. And even then, the information can escape. Now it's all recorded. It's all transcribed. It's so accessible. You can share it with another team member. I love it. It makes a huge impact on the way we do business.
We hear your enthusiasm, Dennis. So AI, I think, check. We gave some very simple examples of things that you can use AI for now. What are other topics people should keep? It's not even in their radar. It's something that they should probably stop and pick up in their car.
Timothy, I'd like to hear you on that theory that I have, and goes above AI, but just the digital tool transformation that we see right now. Is that let's go back to history and let's think about the Romans that built all this beautiful thing, Coliseum, and they had kind of the hammer. And with not only AI but other kind of tool, we bring machinery to accomplish many tasks. And I think what's happening right now is that there's so many trends as well popping up because people are experimenting. But this machinery in maybe 2 3 years, our kids are going to be using it like normally, like they use iPads right now. So I think we see a big transformation, and that there will be a lot of change as well in the value. Like, let's say, often I hear developer are overpaid, for example. But I think right now they should be overpaid because they experimenting stuff that nobody did. However, if there's a machine, we will maybe need a machine operator less than a creative developer as well. So there will be a shift, I think, within the next year about those profession and this transformation.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it's probably going to take a little bit longer for it to be good enough. I agree. We've checked out some of these transcription tools. We wanted to do live interpretation rather than having like a sign language person for some of our events. But we found actually not there yet. Like it may be good enough for something that's not doesn't have to be perfect. In the next 3 years, it could get there. I think there's a lot more, of course, as we know, there's chatbots. This will be great once this is good enough. I don't have to answer emails. I can just have them done for me, and then I can look over the responses. Even we've seen with Asana, they're working on kind of organizational management through AI. That'll take maybe a little bit longer than 3 years, but it's getting there. Definitely, these organizations are going to be hollowed out, and we won't need as many employees to do the same amount of work. So that is exciting. But I would just caution on it's not there yet, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that it's not only good enough, but also not offensive. Like, I don't know if anyone has looked at some of the OpenAI tech. It's still not. I certainly wouldn't use it if I was worried about PR.
And that actually, you're opening kind of an interesting can of worms there, and I'm very curious to hear from both of you. As we transition, there's of course some value to talking about, training the existing staff. So not only that you're potentially kind of revolving and finding new people to fit the new roles that are happening, but what about training and preparing the existing staff that you've come to, trust, build a strong relationship with who are valuable members of the team? What does that look like on your end in terms of preparing them for that transition, whether they're going to stick around and learn and adapt, or whether they are going to potentially move on, find a new opportunity for themselves somewhere else? What does that look like on your end?
Yeah, sure. I'll go quick, and then Jan can take over. Basically, I think for nonprofits especially, this is probably, unless you're well-funded, which I think most nonprofits are not, it'll be seen maybe more as an opportunity because there's just so much work to do and not enough people to do it. So you're craving any tool that can make your work easier rather than seeing it as a threat to your job, because your job's constantly under threat anyway. So I think teams need to be very aware of what's coming out in the market, ready to test things, but still, cautious and knowing that it's not here today for many of these areas, but it will be, and they need to use them as soon as they are ready, and not be afraid of. I guess the question is also like, as Elon Musk says, like getting to, or not Elon Musk, but just in general, getting to 99% there is a lot easier than 99.999. So how many nines do you need for it to be good enough to use in your organization is key.
I think one interesting element of the way to frame that problem is when we talk about technologies. I do consulting. I work with a lot of nonprofits that I definitely saw a shift where it went from the technology, some sort of machine that is replacing us, and hence it's a threat to my work and my way and my system of value. I've seen that often actually. To hey, it's just an assistive tool. Right? It's the same way that, if I have a hammer, it's not replacing my job. It just helps it. It makes it easier for me to operate or to renovate. Sorry. And a good example that you gave, Timothy, with with some of those technologies is if I don't have somebody who can sign in an event, because I don't have the budget, it's a smaller event, venue or anything. Having some of those technology helps if the alternative is nothing. And for a lot of organizations, the alternative is nothing. So for example, I know that this show that people are watching right now, we would not be able to do an edit without a tool like Descript, but we still have to open that tool and make a few adjustments because my English is not perfect. We were saying some words that will confuse the software and etc. But the alternative is nothing, right? And as soon as I think that kind of mentality shift, or it goes from replacement to assistance, I think that opens up a lot of interesting options. And then the matter is, can this currently assist me? And how much time does it take for me to be able to start leveraging that tool? Because if it takes me 20 hours to learn the tool that saves me 5 hours, I'm out of here. This is a waste of time. Right? But it also comes back to the idea of training. Maybe I need to get a bit on that boat, because when that thing will happen, let's say if I have no idea of how to use a chatbot, I'm losing a very nice opportunity to be able to filter my traffic and have people to contact me directly on Facebook and on different media, right? So maybe if I spend a bit of time learning how to use chatbots on Facebook, I can save a bunch of time later. But how much? It's not easy to assess. What's your experience there, Jan?
Valentin, it made me think of a model we use often in education, which is the SAMR model, SAMR. So it defines how technology, for example, or tech, will change things in the classroom. So the S is for substitution, and the A for augmentation or assistive, as you mentioned. So with that, we call it enhancement. When you go to the M, which is modification and redefinition, you're in transformation, really transforming the way the job is done in the classroom. And I think this model within Oplan or within the business, even manufacturing business that I gave coaching to as well, I showed them this model and try to figure out what's the goal there and try to get them to understand what's changing first, and without necessarily talking about the process of implementing the tech, having this awareness about what will it impact in my daily and be able to just qualify it is a good start. By after, I think, well, just training when just general, you have to spark the general interest as well within your culture. Like on a private college there was a lot of resistance as well from teachers, let's say, or professionals as well to many trends that we tried to put. But what we did is that the strategic planning really integrated a change of core value to put more about this innovative and unstable. I think instability is something that like when you're experimenting, it's gonna be unstable at some point. Like you said, the tools aren't perfect, and so on. So to be able to inject that in your culture, to be able to face the be more agile. Somehow I don't like that word because it's way you use too much, but just to be more agile in the way you approach innovation and change, and being humble about it. I think is something important. Just that it's not gonna change from, like you said, Timothy, from tomorrow. Nothing's gonna change. But if we don't do that, well, we're gonna stay where we are, or even go behind. Hmm.
Yeah, the reality is that you can fall behind so quickly today. Again, kind of, I'm going to relate back to the tools that I'm seeing, even for things like events. The number of tools has just exploded exponentially. You can run on Hop and you can run on Run the World, AirMeet, all these tools are out there. Which one do you put your energy into learning and adapting? Because it's an issue of too much choice at a certain point that uh, prevents you from potentially from either A, even looking into it, or B, making the right decision, that kind of paralysis of decision. Are you facing any of that on your end? And how do you differentiate between the tools that you kind of and technology that you want to adapt or learn about more versus stuff that's, yeah, there might be value there, but not right now. I'll tackle that in the near future. How do you make those decisions on both your ends? Timothy, do you want
Timothy,
to
I'd
kick
like to
off?
hear. Yeah, I'd like to hear on your side first.
Sure. Could you clarify the question, Dennis, just to make sure that I don't run off into a different direction with it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
you frightened us a bit with that question, Dennis, because it's a good question. It's basically what is your model that you use to decide on what kind of technology you're jumping on, right? And that's and that's a very tough question. So thank you, Timothy. Help us.
No pressure.
I mean, I think obviously there's no rules you can use, right? I mean, I think you want to be biased towards trying new things, towards experimenting, and dropping them quickly if they're not being additive or bringing value. But I think that as you're kind of alluding to, if we don't do that, if we don't have that bias, then within a short amount of time, you're going to be falling behind your competitors, and in the profits means either getting funding or not getting funding. So yeah, I don't know if that's a clear answer, but do it, and if it doesn't cause you to fail, then keep doing it. Keep using that tool, and the tools will get better. There'll be better tools that will come out too. So it's like getting exercise, and then when the race actually begins, you're ready for it.
Yeah, there's no answer, as you said, and I think the moreover that is that you don't like it's like a CRM, okay? So too many people saw a CRM like technology and CRM should be a strategy. So there is no perfect answer, but I think if you don't have a strategy behind it or clear goals, ask yourself some question. But
Okay, I love that. It's not a technology, it's a strategy. We can quote Jan on this one. He's like, that's it. My contribution to the show.
This is going to be a lovely,
think
one of those motivational posters we can make a print of and maybe put it on a shirt.
No, Dennis is already thinking about editing. He's like, that's good. That's the title of my clip. And we see Jan super passionate. We know how it works. So, you know what? I'll propose something a bit more concrete. I think there is a starting point because in the context of a lot of nonprofits, they cannot simply hire or train really, really quickly. Right? Some organizations have a bit of more leeway. If they're, for example, project-based, they have a quick rotation of staff because that's kind of how they're structured. It's a bit more easy to say, hey, we should jump on this. We have 5 people who are finishing their mandate. So who should be the next 5? Do we renew or get some new talents? So that's cool. Now, if you're a nonprofit, you move at maybe different speeds. Some of them have budget for 5 years, and it's culturally very different. You don't just switch staff, and sometimes if you're overbooked, you cannot say stop everything you do. I need you to do on this. I need you to jump on this training that will take you a month, and that you still have to do all the work. Okay, so where I'm going with that? Start with what you already have. And one thing I've seen often in organization is that they assume to know what their employee and staff and volunteer base and interns are passionate about, right? Because you only talk about some stuff, but maybe the person has some interest that you can nurture. Some people are very good at documentation. They have a nice kind of practical mindset for it. So when they learn about knowledge management tools, they might a bit more naturally gravitate towards. So it makes more sense to put a bit more time in training and investment, or maybe some of it they already did on their end, right? So some people I've seen, for example, in my own organization, have I've discovered one of the staff was pretty good at video editing. Actually did a whole undergrad in that. Oh, damn, true. Completely forgot. Because between the moment we hired that person and between the moment we had that discussion, I don't remember exactly the resume of everyone. So as a manager, assume that you don't exactly remember all the resumes of everyone in your team, and that maybe they added a few things that did not even put there in the first place, or they added since. So just have that discussion with the team and start with the base of what you have, right? Because it's true, there's a lot of tech. Doesn't mean you can jump, and you should not jump on all of them, but you can make a few employees very happy if they already have an interest in that. And if you don't look at your internal team, you can make a few employees very unhappy because you're moving towards a direction that they're really not interested in, for example. So,
And it relates to creating white space. And I've heard this concept used quite a few times for organizations now, where there's a dedicated amount of time that's given, whether it's a weekly or a monthly thing, where the organization creates white space for employees to look at things on their own, whether it's creating their own projects, whether it's doing additional learning or research. And I'm curious, I know, Valentin, you personally value creating that space for your employees to learn, whether it's through grants and bring people through DS4Y, for example, in Canada, or through even just their own channels of learning, or creating opportunities for the team to learn together as a team. Talk about technology, right, and then implementing LinkedIn Learning, for example. But Timothy and Jan, what kind of do you guys create white space for your employees? And if yes, how do you do that? If no, why not? Or is that something you're thinking about doing? What do you think?
Well, I'm a bit young for that, so I'd let Timothy go because we're more into the rush of the present day still. So that's one of the issue of startup.
Right. Yeah. The startups have the we just have to be laser focused on the mission, and at the same time you're resource constrained. So just like nonprofits, I like to think a lot in terms of the mission and how we would tackle it from a first principles approach. Sometimes when you're able to have the time to think about things that way, you can really quickly change the way you do things. You'll see the resources that as you were talking about, Valentin, that you have that can help you accomplish the task better. Maybe you can seek out other resources, whether it's tools that we talked about before, such as chatbots or transcription or tools or whatever. I think that kind of approach will keep you constantly renewing the organization and the way that you can accomplish more with the same amount or with less resources. The other thing is that it really depends also on your customers or your funders. And we're lucky that our funders, our partners want us to be innovative. So if we give a new proposal and it says, oh, we're going to try this new tech that, we don't know if it'll work, we're going to try it. They want to see that. Whereas a lot of nonprofits or other organizations, their funders are very conservative and they're not going to like that. So, I don't know if that's something that can be changed.
Timothy,
yeah.
Are you affected by governance in your organization? I know nonprofits often are slowed down by every governance needs and reporting as well.
Yeah, I think we're pretty lucky in that respect that we just have the main things that we said we're going to accomplish, and they don't really care how we go about doing it for the most part. So I think we're lucky, whereas other organizations might not have that freedom. But I think that that it's going to be important for all kinds of organizations, including startups, to try to cultivate a customer base or a funder base or partner base that actually does want to move forward and use new tech. Otherwise, you're going to end up being, it's just like you compare like Tesla versus like the traditional auto industry. I mean, customers of Ford don't necessarily want to buy a Cybertruck. They don't necessarily want, so it kind of keeps you having to maintain the old way of doing things. And that can be a disadvantage, I think.
It's interesting because to some extent, of course, it's a disadvantage when they have to delay that uptake of technology, but eventually they also have to get with the times and then adapt. But it's the scale of the organization, of course, that's going to make an impact there, where Ford can take their time to make those changes slowly over the years, but eventually they do get pushed into it anyways.
I like this room you're in now, Edmonton.
That's like
I'm not in
teleport
an
to a whole new
elvish
place.
part. Yeah, no, so internet on both sources died. So I'm in basically what is like kind of little sound booths. And with such a, I don't know if you see like those little knobs, like crazy old equipment, and it's not even using the same kind of power.
Did we lose him?
I think he pressed one of those. He pressed one of those
good.
buttons.
So go ahead.
And, we had some unintentional consequences there. I lost you there for a second, Valentin.
They're making a very satisfying click. That's all I can say.
If you had a question, we totally didn't hear you, so you're gonna have to repeat that one more time.
No, all good.
So we haven't even touched on crypto. I mean, there's so many other things. I don't know where you wanted to go with the conversation, but
let's go crypto. I'm quite curious about it.
Sure. Do you have any thoughts?
Actually, I thought a lot about this. I bought Bitcoin maybe early years, but I bought some stupid things with it. That's the sad thing about it. But moreover, what I see, I think crypto is, to me, I have some hard time with crypto. Let me tell you why is that I believe in blockchain technology a lot. So I believe it can do amazing things like school diplomas for many colleges around the world are emitted or tokenized within that. But I think that too many projects in crypto emerge and too many projects don't bring value, real value. And by value, I think that the one that are gonna succeed, whether it's a cryptocurrency or just an NFT technology or a dashboard technology, is the one that gonna create value in the real world somehow. That's the one are gonna have the more impact. If you can put value by tokenizing something that exists, not just physically, but that's value within our daily. We're talking 2-3 years, right? But within our existing works or jobs or something, that's where I see value. And I think it's very good to have a world without regulation on that, but I think we're kind of at a point where the thing is already disbalanced. We talk about oligarchs or all kind of thing, but I think it's ended up being the same kind of. So, I think there's some issues, but I'm pretty interested in still. It's unavoidable, but it's the way it's made, and not who makes the money, but to me it's who brings the more value. And I think it's not yet the system is not made, or consumer yet don't evaluate it maybe the same way. In terms of value, they just think, oh, the tech is cool, I'm gonna buy some coins of this or something like this, so without maybe thinking more. So that's my point. But I'm an outsider a bit of this world, so I think it would be an interesting challenge on that.
Yeah, I think that for me, crypto as it is now, I mean, there's the regulatory uncertainty that I think will work itself out in the next 1 to 2 years, I'd say. So I think things will change once that's all above board and nobody has to worry about what's going to happen. But for me, I think it's really about cultivating a community around your organization. The funding is, of course, as well. Obviously, it's easier to get donations through crypto from across the world. But beyond that, I think you're able to do a lot of interesting things that make your community feel closer. They feel more part of the mission. I think you also need to augment that with other experiences, whether we're talking about hybrid events or remote events. I think for us, we're maybe skewing more towards the remote because we do want to be able to serve communities across Canada and across the world. But you can still have interesting hybrid events where you're having, a select amount of people that are coming in person in the studio as you're doing the event live, and and then you're also broadcasting to the world. But in terms of crypto, I think that it's important for organizations to start to diversify their, whether it's customer base or funding base through that, and I think it'll become increasingly important over time.
Yeah, especially as that
I like
funding
that.
base also becomes younger. That method, the mindset is going to change as well, from the old money to the new money. And if you don't look at those new avenues of fundraising, you're going to fall behind and miss out on a lot of potentially big opportunities.
What's funny is that the Z generation in general, generalizing right now, but they tend to be less good at saving money, but they know how crypto works, so they're good at making money. So I'm interested in to see if our societal change and decision change, maybe like classical decision of career or something. This is going to impact. Because I see a lot of my friends that made money with crypto. And let's say they made a great deal of money, and they're making tech on this as well. But it completely like changed the way of thinking and their way of saving and their way of investing as well. So it was interesting to me to see these mental changes.
Yeah, and I just want to say, when I'm talking about crypto, I guess for the conversation we're having here, not so much about investing and making money, but rather because I know a lot in the both in the tech community, but in the nonprofit community, especially on the left, people are very anti-crypto, maybe a large portion.
Bit too much.
So what I'm speaking about is mainly in the sense that you can use crypto to make transactions for literally
Barely anything.
it's more like it's not about buying Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. It's more about using, say, the Lightning Network in order to use US dollars, from Russia to not Russia, whatever, Japan, and getting that into Canada, and then it goes and becomes US dollars here rather than switching to Bitcoin and that. So
Through banks.
I think that'll open up a lot of opportunities for funding, and not even just from communities, from regular people who want to support your organization. But I don't see there being. I think the barriers with getting funding from other governments, this is going to become more common over the next few years.
I think, and you guys are running nonprofit, as I'm maybe less familiar with, but in terms of visibility, what do you think this is going to bring? I think right now there's a fight as well for the spotlight for a nonprofit and so on as well. Just already upcoming with those big recruitment, giving funds and money to several causes. But are you going to think everybody? It's going to be. How do you think this visibility challenge is it going to stay the same, or is it going to change to your opinion, guys?
I don't know if anyone else wanted to jump in on that, but I mean, I certainly have opinions. I mean, I think that the crypto community should be careful about what issues it aligns itself with. I don't think that some of what we've seen in the last year has been positive. It's not good if it's just a Republican or right wing, community. That's. But I think in the long term this will work itself out. I think the benefits are there, and it will become mainstream, and people will get behind it.
I see a few use cases that are super interesting with crypto, and I think that will extremely benefit some nonprofits or some social innovation to be a bit more sensitive about those issues. One of them is that you have issues when you need to pay members abroad, for example, and you need some cases where you need to be able to pay activists in an anonymous fashion, for example. So you have a lot of kind of activities that you cannot easily link. You had a lot of people in war zones where accessing money flux and things like that are very complicated. One use case, Jan, you talked about it, which is not the cryptocurrency, but the blockchain. There's a huge issue of transparency in nonprofits, and especially real-time transparency. If I give money, can I actually know where it went? There's good reasons for not all your money to go in the very popular causes, because everybody wants to save that specific cute animal. And what happens often in practice is some of that money get diverted to other causes as well. It's part of kind of a portfolio of causes. But the problem is that I think people are right to expect transparency, and blockchain technology allows to say, you know what, every dollar or every activity that we have, we can do a real-time audit of those things. And for me, if there's I can choose between two organizations to give $100, and one of them can tell me, here's a system where you can track your money in real time, versus the other one says, at the end of the year, we do a nice marketing report with beautiful pictures and kind of we round up numbers and we tell you a nice story. I will be interested in more of the transparency part. And I think if you're a small little organization, you cannot compete with big NGOs, but you could probably compete on transparency. And transparency is very expensive unless you use some technologies like cryptocurrency, because a financial audit costs a fortune, right? But with cryptocurrency and blockchain, you could probably bring that cost to something a bit more manageable for an organization.
That makes me think of one sector that was not seeing so transparent is food. Let's say food and
Mm-hmm.
pharma. Now they have
Yep.
traceability rules to retrace all of the chain of each element and so on. It works pretty well. It's pretty cheap. So I believe this is going to come sooner or later.
IBM actually invested in the crypto, sorry, not in crypto, in blockchain technology for food supply, because it's an insane logistical problem to be able to say, I need to ship those products from point A to C to D, and all those people need to sign, and you also need to have some information like what is the temperature it was stored at, etc., etc. Very similar to the vaccine we had. I had a lot of logistics to confirm. And that nobody can cheat in the system, because if you store it the wrong way, it's not just that you lose money, you can actually endanger lives. So you need a system you can trust that can involve 10, 20 different parties. So I think nonprofits can benefit from that knowledge as well, because what I see right now in Ukraine is that a lot of it, in Poland helping Ukraine, is that a lot of it deals with logistics and trust. If I have a pallet, by the way, I'm looking for somebody who can help me move 2 barrels of medicine right now, just in case, if somebody knows. If I have
Come
them
over.
in May 10th. That will arrive in the airport of Warsaw, and I need to move it across the border, and from the border know that somebody can pick it up and ship it to the place in Kiev. And once somebody has it in Kiev, I need them to sign. So this becomes a very simple logistic problem that blockchain was built to authenticate and validate, right? So I think that for nonprofits could be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you summed up everything very nicely with those, those comments, Valentin.
Yes.
So I think we're running a little, over time at this point, but I really didn't want to stop you guys because the conversation was great. But as we kind of wrap things up, is there any final message you want to, leave the conversation on, whether it's personally for what you're working on, whether it's technology based around what you're looking towards? I want to give each of you the spotlight to highlight that, of course, and then tell us a little bit about what you're working on that the audience should be aware of. Jan, why don't we kick off with you?
Actually, so last thoughts on that is that this is the best time to be alive so far. So it's nice to see, like, I couldn't imagine myself maybe living 30 years ago seeing one innovation per week in newspaper. I think communication is there, people talk, people experiment. So it's definitely a good place to be right now. And that the next thing that we're working on in terms of at Oplan, what we're working on is really to make assistive technology accessible to anyone and to every neurodiverse person or any disabilities they have. I think this is a big challenge that we're gonna have to make all these technology accessible to all those neurodiverse people.
That's awesome. I love it. And Timothy, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think that AI LunchLab maybe has somewhat of a similar story in the sense that we started in order to provide more opportunities for people to get into the field of AI. Initially, students at Concordia, and then that became everyone virtually anywhere, although our funding is for students in Quebec. And especially with regards to underrepresented groups in tech, because it's just not okay that this tech would be, dominated by, men, cisgendered, straight men, etc., white men. We need to have a diverse group that's working on this in order to have the kind of world that we want. And I think that these technologies need to be in the hands of more people. And it's not just something that's, I think, an opportunity, which I think it is, but it's also, if we don't do that, whether it's on an organizational level or a community level or a country level, then we are going to be falling behind the others. And so it's kind of both the carrot and the stick that we have to do it. I think back to maybe the 90s where every organization had to get online. Now every organization needs to get on board with some of the trends that we talked about, whether it's using machine learning tools and using some sort of crypto related tech or other things in order to be competitive and to be able to deliver more on the mission that you want to achieve.
Valentin, do you have a message for us as well?
Yeah, I'll basically share a bit of. I've started with showing the location here, the crisis center in Warsaw for the Ukrainian situation. And what I see next across the room is basically a lot of boards filled with information about different organizations. And the way it works is it's a Google Doc that is basically contains a table of different organizations and what they need and what they don't need. And it makes sense for a certain setup where you need to print files. But for me, I think we go about it a bit backwards in some ways, because these days you could have it shouldn't be a Google Doc to have a table. That should be a Google Sheet. It should be maybe some sort of Notion on other type of document that people can collaborate. Because right now, if somebody changes the document online, you have to reprint the document, the corresponding page of it. And ultimately, I think all of it comes from good faith of people wanting to help and help as quickly as possible. Nobody goes into the world of nonprofits because they want to look at Excel sheets the whole day. But I think those tech skills and jumping all those trends, if it's done carefully with strategy and not, as we said, technology early on, could really translate into more impact. That means that if somebody wants to help, he can access to a collaborative document because people know how to use those tools from his phone. He can add a bit of how he can help, what access, what information, what resources he needs to, and have this kind of real-time discussion. I think those digital tools can help us having more impact, and this is why it's such an important thing.
So speaking of those tools, we were here on StreamYard today, shouting out to all our social medias. So I want to take the opportunity to give you guys a great big thank you for those of you who tuned in to listen, for those of you who are going to watch this afterwards, and of course to our awesome guests, the experts of their field, leaders, Jan, Timothy. Thank you for being here today. We greatly appreciate it. You've been with us before, and it's always a pleasure to have you on here to have these big picture perspectives and discussions on what's happening in the ecosystem and what leaders like yourselves are doing about it to stay on the knife's edge and innovate, bring new ideas to the industry. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, guys. Awesome
Yeah,
as
thank you
always.
so much. It was fun.
So Valentin, any final messages for our viewers?
Yes, we're not done yet. Another round, but not right now. There's a second part of that episode which is dedicated to long-term trends. We talked about a few topics that I think is mature enough in some fields. Granted, that some of nonprofits and social innovation organization can look at into. Cryptocurrency, blockchain for transparency. We talked about tools for AI. We covered we talked even about CRMs and things like that. So a lot of those is literally something that you can download. We can use right away. You can train your staff into using. But next episode will be about long term. So 3 years and up. Technologies are not there yet. You need to be very technical, maybe to know how to use them. But you should probably keep an eye on them because they will change the landscape drastically. So tune in for the next episode. It's going to be normally in about a month. You'll see the information on our social media. And as usual, write some comments, share your clips. This really helps. We know every time you share, and we appreciate every time. So if you think that was relevant, that could help your colleagues in the ecosystem, feel free to share. We'll appreciate.
And one last thing before we let you go. The most important part is that we're always keeping our doors open to future potential guests. So if you like what we do, if you enjoy discussing ideas in this kind of open dialogue format that we like to host, our door is always open. We're always looking for experts, community members, and leaders to join us on screen and have these conversations that are important. Share your advice, share your strategies, share your perspective. So let us know, get in touch with us by social media, write us a little message, whether it's in the comments or by message on LinkedIn, Facebook, even YouTube, where we're keeping an eye on that. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.